All right. Good, actually, this afternoon. We are going to jump right into 1 Samuel 24. So, last week, if you were looking for the 1 Samuel lesson, there's a brief video discussing what happened. I'll kind of give you guys some background because I feel like it's probably pretty cool to fill it in. So, we had two goats here who were literally due at any time. One ended up having her kids on Wednesday of last week, and the other one, they were both bred about the same time, was kind of delaying, and she wasn't progressing as she should have. And so when she actually went into active labor, it was around like 9 o'clock that morning before we were getting ready to do our 1 Samuel lesson. And I noticed that she was kind of struggling, so I guess the shepherdess in me was like, well, okay, we're going to sit out in the goat pen all day. And we ended up sitting out there all day, and I'm so glad we did, because she ended up having the first kid was actually coming out wrong and had actually one leg, the front leg was back, one was forward, and the head was actually tilted down so that the baby couldn't progress forward, which actually stopped all the other kids from progressing forward. And we also learned that the third kid was presented breech. So we actually had to have the vet come out, and she had to manually deliver the kids. And so, sorry for the delay, but it actually was very, very beneficial. So we have now with the two goats, we have 6 healthy kids. And we'll show you those sometime this week. We'll give you kind of like a farm tour and show you how they're doing. So I appreciate you guys' patience, but I'm also very, very happy that we have that break, because the Most High was actually able to open up some more insight to our text, so we'll be able to journey through and have some fun and learn some new things today. So we're in 1 Samuel chapter 24. Just a kind of, I guess, a background. So last week in 1 Samuel 23, we learned about how David helped the men of Keilah. David consults Yah as to whether or not Saul's going to give him over. Jonathan comes, visits David in the stronghold, and encourages him. And then David is still being pursued by Saul. Saul actually gets so close to David till he's almost gonna, capture him. And Yah has a distraction happen somewhere else, and Saul goes off to defend Israel against the Philistines. So this week, we're jumping right back in that area. There's one point where I'm going to have to show you my computer screen. We're actually working out some new technology for the YouTube and Patreon audience so that you guys can actually screen share. And hopefully soon we'll be able to actually see and interact with you guys kind of face-to-face in a more webinar style. But for now, I have something. I am going to show you my screen, so when I pick it up, just let me know if you guys can see it. It's just brief, but I think it's very, very important for the lesson today. All right, 1 Samuel chapter 24. Oh, the title of today's lesson is An Enemy's Confession. All right, so 1 Samuel chapter 24. And it came to pass, when Saul was returned from following the Philistines, that it was told him, saying, Behold, David is in the wilderness of En-gedi. Then Saul took 3,000 chosen men of all Israel, and went to seek David and his men upon the rocks of the wild goats. I think I shared with you guys the week before last, that me and my family, once on my own and then once with my husband and the children, we actually had the opportunity to hike in En-gedi, see the oasis in En-gedi, and just see how the terrain was built. And that's why I said I have a picture for you guys for today, because it gives such a much more concrete perspective. Now, I think it may have looked a little bit different than this. I mean, maybe more water, maybe greener. Who knows? But it is a it's a very hilly side, okay? And Saul comes back from the Philistines, and the first thing on his mind is, all right, let's go back and get David. Back to my mission. And he's constantly, you can see, he's just distracted. Yah is constantly pursuing you, constantly still trying to use you in the capacity in which you're chosen. But you are so focused on this other person that you can't even seem to function in your call, okay? So he's in the wilderness of En-gedi. He takes 3,000 choice men. This is a direct reference back to what Yah said would happen, not necessarily the pursuing of another man, but when the king or the leader forgets his purpose and his call, what will happen to the people. And when Israel asked for a king back in 1 Samuel chapter 8, Yah told Samuel to give the children of Israel an admonition and to tell them what kind of leader was going to come out of them choosing a king instead of choosing Yah as their king. And in 1 Samuel chapter 8, and we're going to start at verse 9, this is where Samuel gives that description, and you'll see why this kind of connects. It says, "Now therefore hearken unto their voice, howbeit yet protest solemnly unto them, and show them the manner of the king that shall reign over them." And Samuel told all the words of Yahuwah unto the people that asked of him a king. And he said, "This will be the manner of king that shall reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for himself, for his chariots, and to be his horsemen, and some shall run before his chariot. And he will appoint him captains over thousands and captains over 50s, and will set them to ear his ground, and to reap his harvest, and to make his instruments of war and instruments of his chariots." And so what it's pretty much saying is, he is going to forget, and it's going to become about him, about what he wants, about his personal passions and goals. And you can see it happening in Saul. And this is not just for Saul. We're actually going to see this in a lot of the kings of Israel. And then obviously when the kingdom splits, kingdom of Israel and of Judah. And what he does in 1 Samuel chapter 24 is directly in line with what Yah said would happen. He goes in verse 2, "And he takes 3,000 chosen men out of all Israel, and went to seek David and his men upon the rocks." The purpose of Yah's army is not for the personal battles of anyone. But Saul has this personal qualm for whatever reason against David, pretty much because he's not chosen anymore. He knows David's going to be the next king. He's going to pursue him with Yah's men. But he takes the men from the community, from their families, to go fight an unjust and an unrighteous war, all because he couldn't seem to follow Yah's laws, statutes, and commandments in accordance with what he told him to do. And now you're putting the lives of Israel's men at risk. You're putting David in a position to, if Yah allowed to have to fight and battle and possibly kill his own brothers and not brothers, but his own cousins and relatives and the children of the community that Yah has chosen. What an uncomfortable place to be put in, because a person can't seem to accept the judgment that Yah has put upon him because of his own actions. All right, so verse 3. "And he came to the sheepcotes by the way, where was a cave." So this is what I'm going to show you. So in that area of En-Gedi, the wilderness looks like this. And this is a picture of the sheepcotes. The sheepcotes are a place where a shepherd would take the sheep in order to get them out of the elements. Because, in the wilderness, there's not always covering in this area specifically. So these caves or these crevices that are created... Oh, you can't see the screen. Do I need to bring it closer?
It's frozen too. Give me a thing of the battery is low. It's back.
Is it charging?
It's nope, it's stopped charging.
If this feed is still going, is it still going?
It's still going. You're still good. They can see that screen. Okay. The light is glaring on it though. But.
Okay. So this is a sheep coat. I don't know how much of it you guys were able to see. All right, and it gave you a long time to actually look at it and study it. But it's a place or a cave where the sheep would actually be taken into to get out of the elements. What's really interesting about this is David would have been very, very, very familiar with sheepcoats. And the reason why is because David was a shepherd. When David was called to serve Yah, he was actually out with the sheep in the field serving Yah. Just give us a second.
We're charging.
Okay, perfect. So he was out with the sheep serving serving his, you know, caring for his father's sheep, but he was actually in training for this very moment. So David was very, very, very much familiar with sheep coats and these protected areas found often in clefts of rocks in particular areas. So this particular place, you can see how you could have entered into or taken your sheep or you're into this place. And if it was cold, because there were cold times, Israel gets really, really cold. Then if you take these sheep and you're in this area, it would have kept this space warm. Or if there was, you know, you're guarding the sheep from the elements or hail or too much rain or a mudslide, whatever it was, there were these areas that were naturally created because of the topography where you could enter into and be protected. All right, so it says, and it came in Saul, and he came to the sheepcotes by the way where was a cave, and Saul went in to cover his feet, and David and his men remained in the sides of the cave. So these areas, they could be huge. You can tell that, right? And so there's like crevices and cracks just like anything else, and there's like, it's dark because it's inside of a mountain side. And it says that he went in to cover his feet. So here's the first really interesting point. Okay. Actually, let me go back before I give you this. This one's hilarious. Let me elaborate a little more on David. So Yah didn't put David on a journey. So David and his running from Saul and being in the wilderness was not something that was unfamiliar to David. And I mentioned that because he was a shepherd. He had been out into the lands, maybe not particular in Gedi, but possibly. He knew the land. When you take sheep out and you take them to watering holes and areas, so you know what to look for. And so when Yah allowed for Saul to pursue David, it wasn't something that David wasn't prepared for. And so a note that I had here was just know that the trials of the wilderness, the personal wildernesses that we all go through, that we'll all enter into, we are prepared and trained for them. And it's in going through the trials that we're actually putting into practice the lessons that we learned before we were taken through that. Of course, we're going to learn additional lessons, and we're going to be reproved and fortified in the process of going through trials and going through tough times. But Yah has, in some of the most unconventional ways, prepared us. David would have never thought that keeping his father's sheep diligently and learning how to be a shepherd would, one, help him in fleeing and knowing where to go and where to hide and where to find refuge, but also it's going to help him in shepherding and leading Yah's people. You would have never known. Okay, so back to Saul going in and he covers his feet. The term here for cover his feet actually means that he went in to take a bowel movement. So Saul goes in by himself. A little bit later on, we're going to see Saul go somewhere to sleep, and the scenario is completely different. He's surrounded by his men. They're supposed to be watching and guarding because you're resting. When you go to sleep, you have people watch. So Saul wasn't dipping off for some like private R&R in a cave. They were out pursuing David, came across a sheepcote or a cave area, and he went in to poop. And so think of it like this. If you were in a cave and you were on the battlefield, which needs your privacy, you would put your back to the back of the cave, right? And you would watch the opening. And so he didn't know, though, that this cave that he had entered into, that David's men were in the far cracks and crevices of the cave, okay? So the idea of the word for to cover his feet is the word ma'arah. I mean, for the word for the cave, for the hillside is ma'arah, right? And so the idea of to cover his feet, the word is actually galeg. Yeah, galeg. And it means to, and I'm going to spell it out for you. Let me pull this up. It actually means that he went in to release or to have excrement. And it's translated as cover his feet because, so the word is actually savak. That is the word for to screen or to cover. And then the word for feet is releg. So it was savak releg. And he went in. And the idea would have been he would have went into the cave. And he has on this garment. And he would have squatted down and pulled his robe and stuff back behind him. he was squatted down and he would have pooped, and then the idea of he would have pooped in a hole, because you don't just poop on the ground. He would have dug a hole and then pooped and then covered it. So that's why it says that he covered his feet. You probably would have kicked it over, obviously, kick the dirt over your poop with your feet. Okay, so Saul goes in the cave to take a poop, to have a bowel movement. And David and his men remained inside. And the men of David said unto him, Behold, the day of which Yahuwah said unto thee, Behold, I will deliver thine enemy into thine hand, that thou mayest do to him as it seemed good unto thee. Then David arose and cut off the skirt of Saul's robe privily. So this morning, me and Yosh were talking about this, and it's so interesting how stealthy David has. Now, you're in a cave, you don't think anybody else is in there, so his guard is completely down. How much more can your guard be down when you're using the bathroom? And we know it was a poop and he wasn't going to the cave to pee, because men pee. It's a group of men out in battle. They probably pee on trees. You don't go hide, or you don't go into privacy as a male, from my experience with males, to pee. It's because, having a bowel movement is a private moment. Okay, so he's in there and he's doing this, and David comes up behind him, like quietly, so like a ninja, right? And he takes the skirt of his garment and he cuts it. But remember, Saul's a Hebrew. So if he cuts the skirt of Saul's garment, he also cut his fringe. And so the fringe signifies it's a picture of the covenant. So although Saul is completely doing everything upside down, right side up, Saul is still a Hebrew. Saul is still the king. Saul is still the leader. Yah has not fully given the position, if you will, in the action form to do the work over into David's hand. David is next after Yah finishes and completes what he's doing with Saul. So he takes and he cuts it. That was not David's to cut. The fringe on the garment is a personal signification between the children of Israel and Yah, and it represents Torah and the keeping of the commandments, and it's supposed to be a beautiful sign of covenant. Okay, and so essentially the symbolism really goes back to when Saul was cut off from being king. So there's so many things happening, and it wasn't David's place to do it. And we're going to see how David immediately reacts to what he does. Okay, so it says, the men told him, Yah delivered him into your hand. And he's like, I'm not going to kill him, but I'm going to cut his robe. So you heard this voice, you acted. Because, and then immediately it says, he cut off his robe in verse 5. And then it came to pass afterward that David's heart smote him because he had cut off Saul's skirt. And he does it. He's like, man, he delivered me in your hand. It's like, now you're like playing with him. You cut the garment, you cut it off. And you have this man's fringe in your hand. And you immediately get convicted. And David says, and he said unto his men, Yahuwah forbid that I should do this thing unto my master Yahuwah's anointed, to stretch forth my hand against him, seeing he is the anointed of Yahuwah. So it wasn't David's place to cut it off. It had already been done. The process had already been done. David's job is to wait. And we see that. Yeah, you flee, you run, you wait. Yah is doing something. And it had already been done, and this was a part of what Yah was getting ready to do. Saul had already been rejected by Yah. And it was foreshadowed in how, in 1 Samuel 15:27, when he had disobeyed Yah, didn't follow the commandment, and he reached and grabbed on to Samuel's skirt and ripped the fringe, or ripped the kanaf, the wing, off of Samuel. And Yah told him, Samuel prophesied that just as you have done this, the kingdom has also been ripped from you. And so this moment has this like huge crescendo of like all these things coming back together, right? So David cuts off Saul's, the wing of his garment. He's holding it, and his men are like, so what are we gonna do? And he's like, oh man, like this, no, I can't do this. I can't. He is not only the king, and he's not only my master because he's the king, but he's Yah's anointed. And so it says that, so David stayed his servants with these words and suffered them not to rise against Saul. But Saul rose up and went out of the cave and went on his way. So Saul is still king. No matter how we feel about what he's doing to David, what's happening, it's fully established that Saul is king, right? Until Yah's plan is fully complete and fully revealed. It is not our job to taunt, ridicule, or harm those in the process of their journey as Yah, even if they are in the wrong, if Yah is dealing with them. It takes a person with wisdom and understanding to see that although this person is pursuing me and although they've done all these wicked things, they're not mine. He's not my servant, and he's not my enemy because he's not against me because of me. He's against me, and he has this internal battle with Yah. And to see all that clearly and to step back and to hold back those who want to act on your behalf in a moment is very, very, very difficult. But David sees beyond his own personal, I'm away from my family, I'm away from my wife, I haven't seen my mom, like all these things, and he goes, it's not our place, right? So even when we know the outcome, because David knows that he's been anointed to be king, we don't get the opportunity to act on Yah's behalf, especially when Yah hasn't told us to. Yah had already made provision for David, and his job was to be patient as Yah worked out the things in place with Saul. Because Saul could have just stopped. Like, he had choice and he had option. Saul's end does not have to be one of tragedy and of sorrow. Saul could have said, you know what? I already know what Yah's desires, and we're going to learn that in a second. And I can just stop. Okay? David was not to punish, kill, or execute Yah's judgment, but he was supposed to stand still and trust the process. David knew and understood honor, right? This is the king of Israel. This is my father-in-law, and this is Yah's anointed. There were too many levels that David would have had to jump to feel like it was his personal responsibility to reprimand or bring about judgment to Yah's anointed. And scripture tells us you don't touch Yah's anointed. Why? You don't know what Yah is doing with this person. You don't know what process Yah has this person on. It may look ugly and tragic and terrible to you, but there have been people who have turned away and turned away from their wickedness and turned back to Yah. And if it would have been up to people to execute judgment or to give and administer the final blow to that person's life, then their opportunity for redemption would have been cut off. And the process for Yah is never to remove a person's opportunity for redemption, but he's long-suffering, and he gives grace and love and compassion to those who are called and who are his in order to give them the opportunity to turn away from their ways. But if it was up to man, and if it was up to us, we would have cut people off and thrown them off the journey. And we have in some ways, both spiritually and physically, by cutting people off, throwing them off the journey, and we stand in between the redemptive work of Yah and their fate and their future and their soul. And it's a very, very dangerous place to stand. And so David immediately feels that, like, if I do something and if I muddy the water and Yah is actually doing something and working out something, then his blood is on my hands. If I let these men kill him, how can I rest? How can I be a proper leader of Israel and show them the way of righteousness and Torah if I am going to turn against Yah's anointed? What would I be teaching my men and my soldiers and Israel as I begin to lead them? What will they see about me? What kind of person am I painting to them? And so David knew that when it was his time to reign, he needed to have set an example of how his men would honor him, but ultimately how they would honor and follow Yahuwah and his statutes and commandments. And no matter what somebody else does, it doesn't relieve you of your duty to do what you know to do and what you know is right. Yeah, if David killed Yah's anointed, then it would set a precedent for him as ruling king. So then his head is always on the chopping block, essentially. So when a person's upset with him, or when something happens, then this is the status quo. And the reality is that Torah has to be above everything. So what David does is, it says that David, in this verse, stayed his servants. Because this meant that these men were not just, they were They were watching him for his command. They were learning, if you will, on the job. They were men who believed and loved David, but they also had to believe and understand the call and also love Yah at the same time. And so before it says, and David's men were with them, but the term changes to servant because now they are now being taught. They are his students. They are learning a lesson in his action of how to move forward. So David compels his men to stand down. You know, like you see the movies in war, like stand down, soldier, put your gun down, right? Like no, absolutely not. This is a command. It says to stand down, and he showed them how to be compassionate. A lot of times in war, and a lot of times with men who are trained in combat, one of the things that leave and are sometimes is necessary to kind of suppress is compassion, because the call and the understanding of battle has to take precedence over personal feelings and how we feel about things, because it can eventually get somebody else killed. Well, in Torah, and when we're talking about battle, Yah's not so much that way. When it comes to Israel, especially when the judgment is being executed against Israel, and he's trying to work out a righteousness in his people, and he's giving people time and space to repent, there has to be compassion. So what a person may do at one time cannot be acted upon in that moment, because that person may not feel like that 5 minutes from now, 10 minutes from now. And it is never the purpose of Yah to destroy those who he is pursuing in order to win them over and bring them back into the fold. So he teaches his warriors to also exercise compassion as they are dealing with, they're not battling the Philistines or the Jebusites or the Hittites. You're talking about, we're fighting against our own. That could be your cousin, your brother, your uncle over there with Saul. And if we start and we don't do this wisely, then our own are dying. And not that any life is less precious, but you're talking about dying over something senseless, because the reason why Saul is pursuing David is all based upon a false idea that he has in his head and a battle that he has between him and Yah. Okay, so David was teaching his men in the midst of his trial how to follow Yah and not act just because you can, and not just use scripture to say, behold, today Yah has done exactly what he said he was going to do. Knowing that every time something happens, it's not the fulfillment of something, but it's also, even more importantly, the working out of something in us, so that when the fulfillment of that thing actually occurs, we can see Yah in it and not have to take things into our own hands. It is very important in trial and in the wilderness journey of our soul to be patient, not only with the people on the path, and not only with even our enemies or those who choose to put themselves in a place of our enemies, but also with ourselves, so that we don't get too hasty in acting upon the whims and the things that we feel are the fulfillment of what Yah has promised us, but to be steadfast and stay the path and wait to the full culmination of something, so that we know 100%, we can be 100% sure that Yah is the one that is doing it, and we're not taking things into our own hands. So the men stepped back, and they waited for Saul to finish, and then this happens. It's verse 8, it says, David arose afterward. So after Saul leaves and walks out, right? And then David went out of the cave and cried after Saul, and he said, Adoni, meaning my master, Hamelech the king. And when Saul looked behind him, so he had not even turned around yet, he was vulnerable. And when a person is so caught up in their own rage, in their own mind, they are the most vulnerable. If you don't watch karate movies, you should. Over the past 2 years, my husband's an avid karate movie fan. And it shows this thing of like a true man and a true warrior, a true woman and a true fighter and a true leader. You never fight somebody from behind. You never take on a person when they're vulnerable. In most settings, and especially in karate, both people go off and train and get as good as they both can, and then they come back to fight. So this idea of pursuing somebody when they're running, or when their back is to you, or when they are defenseless, is not in Torah. Because he could have just took his sword, essentially, and cut his head off when he was going in the cave to have a bowel movement. Or he could have, after he ran after him, just cut off his head. He wouldn't have even heard him coming. But he calls after him to stand and look at him face to face. And David shows his men in the next moment something that may have had them so confused. But there's a demonstration of manhood and honor and lack of fear and trust in Yah that is presented when you stand face to face with your enemy and have to say, what is your problem? Essentially. And so David's men who are literally watching this, you look at Saul's out, and David goes out behind him, which means that you could be exposing all of us. You're putting yourself in danger, right? So they're being given a up-close example of honor and righteousness, but also how to trust Yahuwah. They knew that Saul was trying to kill David, and they also knew that Yahuwah was on David's side from this one moment. So imagine, as we're reading this next part, and these words are being spoken into the ears of David's men, how that must have had such a huge impression on how they saw their leader, how they saw Yah, and how they saw his plan. Okay. So he cries after him, Adonai Hamelech. He says, Adonai Hamelech, my master, the king. And Saul looked behind him, and David stooped with his face to the earth and bowed himself before Saul. Saul is trying to kill him. Yah even said in the past chapter that the men of Keilah will give him up. Like, Saul is coming to get you. Yes, even Yah is on par with this. David was showing his men something so powerful. One, I'm putting myself at the mercy of Yah. If I'm Yah's, and Yah said that I'm going to be king and this plan is going to come to pass, I have to trust him fully. And I can no longer act in my own strength. I can't I can't pursue and do things in a way that are going to set the wrong example. But I have to fully submit to this call. And he needed clarity, I think. Like, man, okay, Saul's right here. Let me show him that I'm not after him. Because all this time he's been running from Saul. Now he's like in the process of being in the wilderness, becoming a different kind of man too. Like, I'm tired of running. And I'm being misrepresented, and I need to say something. And so he comes, he calls after him, gets his attention, and then he bows down with his face to the ground, which meant that Saul could have taken a sword and just cut David's head off. Right? And David said to Saul, wherefore hearest thou men's words, saying, behold, David seeks thy hurt. So why are you listening to men tell you that I'm seeking to hurt you? Look at my position. Look at my disposition, right? And so he literally says, behold this day with your eyes have seen how Yahuwah delivered you into my hand in the cave, and some told me to kill you. But my eyes spared you, and I said, I will not put forth my hand against Yahuwah's against my master, for he is Yahuwah's anointed. So he literally runs him down. What happened? Like, look, just back there. Like, I saw you the whole time. And they told me to kill you. And I absolutely would not, because of my respect and my reverence that I still am showing you as Yah's anointed. So moreover, my father, and he calls him father. Why does he call him father? Why does he call him Avi, right? Because not only is it a sign of reverence, I don't know if you guys know of certain cultures. This was huge when we were like in Trinidad and Tobago with the islands, like auntie or uncle, and you don't even have to know the person. I remember when I was first there and somebody was like, oh, have a seat, auntie. And the guy got up and I was like, oh, you know her? And he's like, no, I don't. But it's a sign of respect. And so not only is it a sign of respect and showing that, like, you were a father figure to me, you took me in your home, but also it's his father-in-law, that's his wife's father. Like, we forget that. Like, these people are actually like multiple levels of related. So he goes, moreover, my father, see the skirt of your robe in my hand. For that I cut off the skirt of your robe and killed you not. Know thou and see that there is neither evil nor transgression in my hand. I have not sinned against thee, yet you hunt my soul to take it. He's saying, Not only did I didn't just pop out and see you right now when you walked out of the cave. I was in there. I was so close on you that I cut the sword of your garment. Mind you, David's sword had to be so sharp to cut off fabric from somebody and they not feel it. He was excellent with the sword. He was an excellent warrior. And Saul was ultimately vulnerable. And he's explaining that to him with respect. He enters every statement with, I'm not saying this to I'm not saying this to punk you. I'm not saying this to I'm just saying, if I was trying to do something, could not I have done it? Okay? So he says, Yahuwah judge between me and thee, and Yahuwah avenge me. Remember? He's like, I can't take on my own vengeance. I can't do this for myself. I'm putting you in Yah's hands. Yahuwah avenge me of you. But my hand will not be upon thee. He swore as a man. Just as Saul had swore to Jonathan that he was not going to harm David, right? And lied. He's doing the same thing, but he's telling him, I'm doing it to your face. You told somebody else you weren't going to hurt me. And you're coming after me to hurt me and literally take my soul. I'm staring you to face as a man with evidence that I could. And I'm telling you that I won't. He said, as saith the proverb of the ancients, wickedness proceeded from the wicked, but my hand shall not be upon thee. David is such a type, we know this, a type of Messiah. And in all of this idea that Hamashiach, when men pursued him, he constantly showed his disciples how to be compassionate and what was really happening and how he had to be obedient to the will of his father, even over the things that they wanted him to do. Well, aren't you supposed to be the king? And aren't you supposed to subdue our enemies? And they said the Messiah would come back and do this. And he's like, hey, Peter, put your sword away, man. We're not fighting people right now. This is a different kind of mission. And that wisdom and that leadership obviously is echoed here. This very proverb, and I could not find the actual proverb because it's not like a proverb in these exact words, but it had to be a saying. If you know anything about ancient African culture, there's always proverbs. It's like, the day you plant the seed, you don't also reap the harvest. And there's a bunch of these little African proverbs. If you ever get a chance, just kind of look at them. They're really interesting, but they're teachings or they're sayings based upon practical observational evidence that give truth, and it makes it easier to explain. So David tells him, he says, wickedness proceeded from the wicked, but my hand shall not be upon thee. And Messiah also says something very much similar, where he says, in Matthew chapter 17, verse 17 and 18, he makes a statement. It's a proverb, and it's making a comparison between how things are supposed to be when in life. Like if a person is doing something good, right? Is that person, and they're doing what is righteous, then how can you call somebody unrighteous in the process of doing righteousness? You're judging a person obviously according to their fruit. And so if you have a tree and the tree is bearing good fruit, you tasted the fruit, it's good, how can you call the tree wicked? But if you have a tree and it's bearing bad fruit, you can call the tree wicked. But in this case, what Hamashiach says is that in verse 17 says, even so, every good tree bringeth forth good fruit, but a corrupt tree bringeth forth evil fruit. A good tree cannot bring forth evil or dysfunctional fruit, and neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. Every tree that bringeth forth not good fruit is hewn down and cast into the fire. Wherefore by their fruits you shall know them. And so David is essentially echoing, well, he's not echoing, he's saying it, but the Messiah echoes the same thing. You're looking at me, and you're saying, this person is trying to kill me, and this person's pursuing after me, and judge my fruit. What has my work shown you? You can say this whole list of things, but you also have to compare it to the reality of the action of the person. And so he stands before him essentially saying, judge me then. Judge what I'm doing. Judge my fruit, because if I was wicked, wouldn't I do wicked people things? What have I done wickedly? If I'm good, wouldn't you see evidence of good? Wouldn't you see evidence of those things? Am I not doing what is right? So then how can you continue to call me, saying to Saul, wicked or evil or somebody in pursuit of killing you? And I'm standing here before you with the opportunity to have killed you, and I haven't done it. It is so important in this walk that we don't get caught up in everything that every person says about everybody. Because the adversary also has a narrative. And Yah also has a goal and a call for people. And if we follow what we think or what people say and don't compare those things to the actions of people, we will put ourselves in a world of hurt. Because if the men during Messiah's time would have listened, if his disciples and everybody would have listened to what people said about Hamashiach and say, well, you know what? We wouldn't, but I don't know, maybe you do be doing that stuff. Then they would have been blaspheming the Hamashiach. But because they had walked with him, they were looking at what the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the people were saying. And they were looking at the actions and saying, these things don't line up. You have to go and you have to go with what you know and use discernment. If you don't know, you don't say nothing. And it's so important, especially in these last days, because Scripture talks about how the adversary is going to put us one against another. Family against family, brothers against sisters, mothers against daughters. And the reason why this is possible, because there's one narrative here, or one narrative in the heart, and then there's the truth. And then there's the fruit and the evidence. And that thing has to be lined up. You can't take a skewed approach to something and make a decision based upon what somebody says and not weigh that against what's actually true, what's actually being done. And so David says, I'm going to read it again, as saith the proverb of the ancients, wickedness proceeded from the wicked, but my hand shall not be upon thee. He's saying, I'm not wicked. If I was wicked, I would do wicked people things. And then he goes, after whom is the king of Israel come out? Like, who are you actually after? After whom are you pursuing? Who are you actually chasing? After a dead dog? After a flea? Like, I am like no threat to you. If you want me, take me. I'm not even fighting. I'm just running. Like, I'm not doing anything. A flea, I'm not even existent. Yahuwah, therefore, be judge, and judge between me and thee, and see and plead my cause. I am innocent. And deliver me out of your hand. You're against me. You have me gripped and in straits, hiding in caves, running. I'm fearing for my life every day. That's you to me. And it came to pass, when David had made an end of speaking these words unto Saul, that Saul said, and let's go back to where our minds are. Remember, it's Saul, David, David's men. Okay? Saul says, is this thy voice, my son? David, that's you? Right? And is this your voice, my son David? So he responds with the same, like, my son, meaning like, he said this in a personal sense. And Saul lifted up his voice and cried, which meant he like almost broke down. Now mind you, men watching, David's men, king of Israel, David being chased, and this moment of just extreme vulnerability. This king is, it means that he lifted, like he's loud, he's not sobbing silently, he's crying, he wept. And he said to David, thou art more righteous than I, for thou hast rewarded me good, whereas I have rewarded thee evil. And thou hast showed this day how thou hast dealt well with me. For as much as when Yahuwah had delivered me into thine hand, you didn't kill me, or thou killedst me not. For if a man find his enemy, will he let him go well away? Wherefore Yahuwah reward thee good for that thou hast done unto me this day. So now he's giving him blessings. And now behold, I know well that thou shalt surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel shall be established in thine hand. Swear now therefore unto me by Yahuwah, that thou wilt not cut off my seed after me, and that thou wilt not destroy my name out of my father's house. And David sware unto Saul, and Saul went home. But David and his men got up unto the hold. How crazy would that have been to sit there and witness that moment? How crazy, first of all, would it have been David saying your part, and then just being like, and when he was done speaking, you're just like, okay. Say my part, and then for that to come out of Saul's mouth. The man who has been pursuing you, trying to kill you, your enemy, Yah forces his lips to reaffirm all that you are going through, and your enemy confesses to you that he knows exactly who you are. Imagine how that must have, one, been a very, very sad moment, seeing your king and your father-in-law and the person that you've been living with all this time in that position. Also, imagine how restorative that must have felt for David, that all of the stuff that he was going through, that it wasn't fake, that he wasn't just crazy, and that he wasn't just making this all up, and that maybe God didn't really send Samuel to anoint me, and maybe it was something else. Maybe he told me to reach and not teach or preach or shepherd or be the king. Maybe he said ring the bell. Maybe I'm supposed to. Maybe I didn't hear him clearly. And in the moment where your faith could be shattering, now Yah is saying, now let me build you up. And let me, in your moment of trusting me, the very lips of the man that is pursuing you is going to confirm for you exactly who you are. Now trust me. That's all I have this week, everyone. I hope that that's encouraging. I hope that we learn how to wait for Yah to bring something around full circle. I hope we understand and learn how important it is to not get in front of ourselves and not to allow our enemy to cause us to stumble into sin against Yah in the process of our walk, in the process of the wilderness journey where things don't seem to line up and where we're doing the best we can and it seems like everything is falling apart, and waiting for those moments of breakthrough, but never leaving the path and never giving up, and always letting Yah be our stronghold and our fortress, and seeing the end result of the matter. There's always tomorrow. There's always more. And all things work together for the good for those who are called according to Yah's purpose. Do not forget that. Do not forget that. Shabbat shalom.